Hello and welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, folks, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome back to the Light 'em Up Lounge. And as you can see, we called in the troops. We've got support here with the one and only Mr. John Strange. We're
Everyone,
actually coming live to you from City of London Cigars, close to Liverpool Street in ye old London town. I have the privilege and pleasure of touring with this fine gentleman here
yep.
and visiting some wonderful cigar shops and lounges all around London this week. And of course, we couldn't miss a show. We couldn't miss a Wednesday, like we haven't ever since we started in the early days of the pandemic. So here we are, live from London, and I'm very much looking forward to welcoming our special guest for tonight, the one and only Jeff Mouttet. Jeff, where are you joining us from? Are you in Nicaragua these days or in
I
the
am in
US?
Nicaragua. I'm in Leon, Nicaragua today.
Fantastic. Jeff, welcome and thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to Light 'em Up.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
The pleasure is all ours. Jeff, you had quite an exciting CV and quite a career, actually in various different industries. With a degree in business administration, you ventured into the automobile industry before joining the dark side of the force and ending up in the cigar industry. And I always find it fascinating how people from all walks of life, with background in various different industries, like ourselves, like you, Jeff, eventually end up in this magnificent and truly
We
inspiring
get the calling.
industry. Oh yeah, and there's hardly any turning back.
Nope.
Jeff, when did the calling reach you, and when did you realize this is what you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
Well, that's an interesting question because I started smoking premium cigars before the cigar boom. My brother-in-law owned a cigar shop in Omaha, Nebraska, called the Smoke Ring. And I walked in there one day smoking a backwoods, and this had to be 1989, 1990. And he told me, he goes, put that out here, smoke one of these. And he gave me a cigar that literally changed my life. It was a La Gloria Cubana Boisvel from Ernesto Perez Carrillo's factory in Little Miami. And I was like, this is what cigars are really supposed to be. Little did I know at that time that was the cigar that was going to kick off the cigar boom. But after my first attempt at college, I went into the car business, and I don't know how exciting a story this is, but after 20 plus years in the automobile industry, I woke up one morning and I literally couldn't make myself go to work. Finally, about 11 o'clock, I got up, dressed, went in, packed up my desk, told my boss I quit. And I had nothing lined up, no plans for a cigar store, no nothing. I was going to my local cigar store every day to a little private room and back and sitting there smoking. And after about 3 months of that, the owner's like, why don't you come to work for me? And I'm like, look, man, for the first time in 30 years, I'm relaxing. I'm not worried about anything. I'm going to draw unemployment for a couple more months and see how it goes. And he goes, I'll pay you 500 a week under the table so you can keep your unemployment. I'm like, why not? So fast forward a year and a half, I tried to buy the store from him. And he gave me a ridiculous number. And that's kind of when the planning for my store started. So in April of 2011, I opened up Riverside Cigars. And about 6 months later, I opened up a cigar bar adjoining Riverside Cigars, connected with interior double doors. So now we've got Riverside Cigars, which is a full service tobacconist on staff, great selection, really laid back, chill environment. And then we've got Max Cigar Bar next door, which has 150 whiskeys on the shelf, over 250 total liquors. We make what was voted the best old fashioned in Louisville, which is quite an accomplishment if you know the bourbon. If you know the bourbon industry in Louisville, we were pretty proud of that. And then in 2021, I started Fosforo Cigars. So it all just kind of organically grew from that one cigar way back in 1990, 1991.
Fascinating. And I initially didn't introduce you properly and tell all our viewers the various cigar endeavors that you're involved with. So you mentioned Riverside Cigar Shop and Lounge, Match Cigar Bar, Fosforo Cigars as a more recent evolution of your entrepreneurial journey with tobacco and cigars. I also wanted to let everybody know, since we're live on YouTube, if you have questions, please chime in into the comments, and I'll happily forward your questions to Jeff. Let me ask you this, Jeff. Ever so often, you know, when you talk with people who are truly passionate about what they do, you know, there's really like two different schools of thought where some people might say if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And other people might argue there's a certain risk involved with working in an industry that you're passionate about, or something that probably used to be a hobby, and then you turn it into a career. And then it could easily suck the fun out of what you initially love, but then it becomes a job. Did you ever feel like being involved with the industry and working in cigars rather than just enjoying them changed your perspective or your passion about cigars?
That's a great question. It probably for me, I mean, except, you know, day 4 of the PCA when you're completely worn out and fried, for me, it enhanced my love of cigars. I still remember my first trip to Nicaragua, and you hear all the people talk about, oh, it takes this many people to make a cigar and this many hands touched it before it got to you. But, and this is just for me, but coming to Nicaragua and going to the farms and looking at the seeds they use and listening to the processes they go through and seeing the curing barns and seeing the fermentation and seeing the constant sorting of tobacco that goes on. And then not to mention rolling the cigars and aging the cigars and packaging the cigars. All of that kind of, for me, brought this industry to life for me. And the more I learn and the more I see and the more I get deeper into the rabbit hole of making cigars, it's just enhanced my love for the industry. So kind of the opposite of that. And look, it's still a lot of work. I mean, I don't love wading through the spreadsheets and all that other fun stuff, but at the end of the day, the juice is worth the squeeze, right?
Amen to that. Now, when you made that switch from your previous career, uh, obviously with a little bit of a transitioning period, but eventually ending up running Riverside Cigar Shop and Lounge and Match Cigar Bar, what would you say were some of the key learnings that you took from your previous career and your previous life and applying them to the cigar industry to maybe do things slightly differently than some of the other operators, or at least take some of that inspiration and implement that into the way you run your cigar operations?
Well, the biggest thing I ended my automobile career at Mercedes-Benz. And I was always, I mean, everything in the automotive business is sales. I was a finance director and a sales manager. And one of the big things I learned at Mercedes-Benz is you're not really selling metal and engine parts and everything. You're selling an experience. You're selling a way of life. You're selling a lifestyle, because people don't pay $120,000 for a car. They pay $120,000 for the experience of owning an S-Class Mercedes-Benz. And so when I transitioned into the cigar industry, I trained all my guys and I worked my counter for years by myself. But I trained them all that we're not selling cigars. We're selling an experience and a lifestyle. Cigars are not a nicotine delivery device. Cigars are a way to create camaraderie, relaxation. You sit back and I love, as an aside, I love the way like consumers will take ownership of a cigar shop. And that can go too far and make it crazy sometimes. But if you enforce your rules, they'll sit down in their chair, in their spot, in their cigar bar, and just relax, makes friends they would never make in any other walk of life. You'll come into the lounge someday and the chief of police will be sitting next to a plumber, next to an unemployed guy, next to a lawyer, next to a construction foreman. And you just don't get those mixed with everything, especially in the US being so segmented now and split along these fault lines. Cigar stores are one of the few places left where everybody can sit down, get along, have a conversation without devolving into all this stuff we got going on in the US now. So the overriding thing I learned was, learn what you're selling. And so many of these high volume stores and, the online guys, they're just trying to commoditize the cigar industry. And to me, that's very dangerous for the cigar industry because this is not a commodity business. This is a people business. And if you're not doing over and above for your consumers and your employees and everybody involved with your store, you're going to get left behind.
Excellent point. I want to get back to that commodity aspect and the different sizes of retail operations. But one thing I find very interesting is when you say that your regulars, the customers who come to your shop, to the lounge, they make the ambience and the environment, and it's almost like an ecosystem that evolves and forms. And to a certain extent, if you have the right audience, it's almost self-policing, right? And it becomes self-sustainable in a way, but you need to build the framework, and you really need to protect that delicate ecosystem. And one thing that struck me when I went on your website, you have certain rules that you've put in place for the lounge as well, and it reminded me a little bit of an icon of our former industry, the hospitality industry, when Sasha Petrosky ran Milk and Honey in New York City, which became one of the iconic cocktail bars and really one of the main hubs or nucleus for the craft cocktail movement. He also put in place these very firm rules of the Milk and Honey house rules and guidelines. How important do you think that is, and how did people react to that? Because not everybody's used to walking into a cigar lounge where you're supposed to have casual, laid back afternoon, smoking your cigar, shooting the shit with your people, and then here comes Jeff Mouttet and tells you, well, these are our rules, and you better play by the rule book.
Well, it's funny how that evolved. It was kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, like, here are the rules, but essentially don't be a jerk and you'll be fine. But we wanted to kind of play around with it a little bit. Going back to your original point, I think the best places are always self-police. And whether you're talking about an athletic team or you're talking about an organization, it's a lot more impactful when your coworker comes to you or your teammate comes to you and says, hey, that's not the way we do things here. If I walk in once every 3 months and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, okay, but it's much more impactful if when you do something like something outside the lines, that another patron or a different employee comes and says, hey, we don't do that here. We don't smash our cigars out in the ashtray. We don't talk about other cigar shops. We just don't participate in that. We're here to relax, fellowship, and have a good time. And that's, at the end of the day, those are the rules, right? Let's sit back in a comfortable leather chair, light our smoke, and have a good conversation. That's what it's all about.
If a cigar retail shop or a cigar lounge could learn something from, let's say, a Mercedes-Benz dealership, what are some of the things that you feel our industry could learn from role models like the automobile industry that you were involved with?
Probably the biggest thing I learned in my time in the automotive industry, I'll tell a quick story. My first day, I got hired into the car business at a little Nissan Pontiac shop in Owensboro, Kentucky. And this old guy pulled up, and he had to be, I was 23 or 24 at the time. And this guy had to be in his 60s in overalls and hip waiter boots. And literally, you could smell the guy from across the car lot. Just stunk like pig manure. And nobody wanted to go wait on him. And so I walked up to the guy and said, "Hello, sir. Welcome to whatever the name of the dealership was, Rivergate Pontiac Nissan." And he said, "Son, I apologize for the way I came out. I just got done slopping the hogs. I'm buying this car for my wife, and I want to buy it right now." And he was looking at a Pontiac Bonneville SSEI from like 1990, which was a $30,000 car in 1990. And I said, "That's fine, sir. How do you want to pay?" He said, "Oh, I'm paying cash." I said, "Well, let me take you in the office." He goes, "No, no, 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 no. Here." And he reaches in his overalls, pulls out a band, $10,000, goes, "Hold the car for me to this afternoon. I'll be back." Well, it turns out he was a multi-millionaire hog farmer from Owensboro that bought 30 more cars for me in the next 5 years, bought cars for family, bought cars for his farm, bought cars for everybody else. And none of the guys at the car lot would wait on him because here was a poor guy that was slopping pigs and they didn't want to wait on him. And everybody's like, "Oh, give me that deal, give me that deal, give me that deal." I'm like, "No, it's mine." This guy just paid $30,000 cash for a car. A long way to get to the story of you should never prejudge. Somebody walks in your shop, he might be wearing shorts and a flip-flop and be a multimillionaire, or he may walk in a $5,000 suit and have all his credit cards maxed out and buy a backwoods. You never know. So you treat everybody with the same respect, the same consideration, and the same care as you would treat anybody.
What a beautiful story. And on that note, I mean, we're here in London, and the City of London Cigars is a great example of a new generation of cigar enthusiasts working hard, bringing in new people into the culture and the lifestyle. And you also, of course, have the old established legacy retailers or cigar places here in London, where it's a bit stiff. You know, you have to wear a suit and tie maybe in order to be let in, even or to be taken serious. To your point, Jeff. So there is different. How can I say? Different cultural aspects about cigar enjoyment and the industry in different parts of the world. And one thing that I always loved about the US is how base democratic cigar enjoyment is, where there's no real etiquette as to how you have to dress when you walk to a cigar lounge, at least in most places, and it's very open and welcoming and laid back. How do you think about curating that experience and also from a visual perspective, from an interior perspective? How did you design Riverside Cigars or Match Cigar Bar to give people an extraordinary experience and for them to understand this is something special and not just your odd mom and pop around the corner, whilst at the same time making it approachable and accessible for a vast array of people?
That's a good question. We wavered for a long time as far as how we wanted to set the store up to kind of help create the atmosphere we wanted, because so much of everything now, life today is so disconnected from other people. So what we finally ended up doing is creating a bunch of small 4, 5, and 6 person seating spaces. So it kind of creates that intimate atmosphere where you're sitting with 4 or 5 or 6 like-minded people. And you end up meeting people, like you said, in US cigar stores from all walks of life. I mean, some of our best customers probably only make 50 or $60,000 a year, but they spend 20 of it in the cigar store. That's just what they do. And I've got customers from China that spend $1,000 a week online. But for us, it's very egalitarian. We try to treat everybody the same and try to, you know, an old business saying, if you don't inspect what you expect, you're never going to get results. So we're not over the top, but we're very cognizant of the atmosphere that we want and that we are going to have in our environment. So if voices start to raise over political discussion, it's immediately, hey guys, we don't do that here. So if you don't inspect what you expect, you're never going to get any results anyway. So we're very cognizant.
And I love the fact that you said it took you a while to sort of test the water, see which kind of clientele you would attract. And of course, you need to be cognizant and aware of your whereabouts and the audience you could potentially attract to your store. But do you believe more in the philosophy of creating the environment in the store and the lounge exactly the way you want it in order to attract the audience you want to have? Or do you feel it's more of a natural evolution and you have to be agile and flexible as to who's going to come and who's going to walk into your store, and then you try to give them the right experience?
In my experience, the second has been the case more often than not. Where like originally I opened with specific hours. Well, 3 months in, we were closing at 7 o'clock at night. Well, 3 months in, all the guys were like, we want to stay, we want to smoke, we want to stay, we want to smoke. I was like, all right, well, we're open till 9 then. And then another 6 months, and the guys at 9 o'clock were, man, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. Well, now we're open every day of the year from 11 to 11 in the cigar shop. When we opened, we were strictly boutique. I was completely against any legacy brands. I didn't bring in Altadis. I didn't bring in General Cigars. I didn't bring in Romeo and Julieta, Monte Cristo, Macanudo, any of the legacy brands I didn't want anything to do with. But as time went on, and actually I had a conversation with John Drew one day, and he said, I want you to do this thought experiment. A guy walks into your store and asks you for a Macanudo Hyde Park. And you say, I'm sorry, sir, we don't carry Macanudo Hyde Park. Let me show you this new company that is a Connecticut blend cigar, no Lajero in it, that's twice as good and half the price. And I've got that cigar in my humidor. I can take that guy to that cigar. I take him to that cigar and I sell him that cigar and he smokes it. I want you to think about this, Jeff, is what John asked me. What does he tell his friends? Does he tell them, I just walked into a cigar store. They didn't care what I wanted, but the guy was so helpful, knew his shit, took me to this cigar. I smoked this cigar. It blew my mind. It's the best thing I ever smoked. And it was half of what my Macanudo Hyde Park was. Or does he tell his friends, yeah, I walked into a cigar store. They don't even carry Macanudo. Never going back there again. You know people like I know people. Probably 75% of those people say, they don't carry my cigar. I'm never walking back in there. And literally that question, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I just laid in bed thinking, what have I done? What have I done? I messed up. I screwed up. So over time, I started incorporating, and now we carry Davidoff and Romeo and Julieta and Monte Cristo. And we're always going to be a more cutting edge, boots on the ground in Nicaragua, knowing about new manufacturers, knowing about new boutique companies. We're always going to be on that edge. But now we've morphed into, we carry Davidoff, we carry Fuente, we carry Romeo and Julieta. So if you ask for that stuff, you can't get it. So I feel you really need to be agile and responsive to what your community is asking you to do. And hopefully we've been able to do that a little bit over.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I believe Fosforo was initially intended as a house cigar for Riverside Cigars and for Match Cigar Bar, and obviously it grew into a full-fledged brand now, distributed by Mike Shepankevich and Pos
Yeah,
Beach, I believe. How did
yeah.
that transition happen, and when did you realize the idea of a house blend is a great one to begin with, but what you had at your fingertips was truly something that could grow into something bigger, more meaningful, that could have relevance for a wider audience.
Well, another story. The Fosforo was, I think, the third or fourth house blend I've done. And the first couple, I fell into the trap where I let the factory send me 3 or 4 samples. I picked one, they made it, it came in, it didn't taste the same. It was, quite frankly, not what I was looking for. So with Fosforo, I came to Nicaragua. I sat down with Colin Ganley. He ran me through a bunch of samples. We smoked some samples from Garmendia Cigars, which is the factory I ended up using for Fosforo. And over the period of about a year, he had a base blend that I liked, but it wasn't all the way there. So we tried 4 or 5 different iterations. Went to all these farms looking for all this Ligero. Couldn't find any Esteli Ligero. Couldn't find any Ligero we liked. We finally hit the blend, and when I came down to Nicaragua to smoke the final blend and approve it, I took like 100 cigars back with me. Well, on the way back, Skip Martin and Mike Rosales at Romacraft were throwing their what they called Weasel Fest, which was an event for retailers. And I went. I've been a Romacraft guy from day one. I'm real good friends with those guys. And I asked them when I walked in, I said, do you mind if I hand out some of these cigars? They just got test blend bands on. They're like, we don't care. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. But like, we don't care. Go ahead. So it's all retailers. So I passed out 30 or 40 of these cigars, the original Fosforo blend, and hand to God, not making it up, if 75% of people didn't come back to me and say, what's the price point on this? And when I told them the price point, which is between $8 to $10, every single one of them asked me if they could carry it in their retail store. And I was, yes. I don't know how. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a distributor. I don't know when the rest of the cigars are going to be here, but we'll figure it out. Yes, you can carry this cigar. I tried to distribute the cigar myself, but it was just impossible. So I talked to Mike and Greg at Cigar Hustler and Pospechek, and they agreed to take me on. And we have a national brand now. We're in almost 70 stores nationwide, and it's going really well for somebody that doesn't have any idea what they're doing.
So what was the initial idea for the house blend? You know, from an economical perspective, you could probably say you want your house blend to be something very approachable, affordable, a great everyday cigar that is maybe suitable for a wide audience and for a lot of people to enjoy and just leisurely pick up. But you being so heavily focused on boutique cigars, and as you said, sort of a cutting edge retailer, offering a very different experience and a differently curated humidor. What was your initial concept for the house blend to match your overall philosophy and house style?
Well, more than not, what you said is what I really took into account. I wanted something that could be approachable for a novice cigar smoker, but also something that somebody that smokes 5, 6, 7, 8 cigars a day could afford to smoke, but also something that your cigar smokers that smoke every day, that it had enough nuance, depth, flavor, and strength for somebody like that, which is really kind of an impossible mark to hit. I think you kind of try to get as far as you can get to there, because at the end of the day, people love what people love, and an experienced cigar smoker is worlds away from an inexperienced cigar smoker. But trying to get something that they can all smoke and enjoy is obviously the goal. And that's why we originally put out a dark Oscuro Habano, that hits medium, maybe medium plus a little bit. But the second thing I did immediately was put out a Connecticut that's a much milder cigar, perfect with coffee in the morning. It's my everyday morning cigar. But trying to hit that slot between your everyday smoker and your novice smoker is really kind of the holy grail of that. So we tried to hit in there somewhere, and hopefully we've been somewhat successful with that.
What I love about all of that is you really started this endeavor with your vast experience in the retail and lounge business. And there's a couple of very successful examples in our industry of people who worked the retail side before and then created their own brand or curated their own blends and sort of stepped on the other side of the fence, offering their cigars, but always based on their experience, facing the end consumer and facing the demands and these particular questions whoever walks into your shop would ask. Do you think that's a very important aspect of the way you curate Fosforo and the blends you have in the portfolio?
Yeah, I think it really is. When we talk to retailers, we always kind of use the tagline, it's a cigar made by a retailer for other retailers. And listening every day to what people say when you're behind the cigar counter, and the questions that you get asked over and over and over again. Do you have anything quality that's sub $10, sub $10? I want to spend $7. I want to spend $8. I don't want, there's this, over the last couple of years in the cigar industry, you're seeing these $22 to $100 cigars all over the place. But for me, and we sell them, every time I order a batch of Saka's unicorns, I think I'm crazy, but I order 10 trays and they're gone in a week. And look, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but outside the price of tobacco, there's not very many differentiators between the price of Saka's unicorn and my Gordo. I mean, sure, his broadleaf costs $42 a pound, and my Oscuro Habano costs $22 a pound. But by the time you take that out over your yields per pound per thousand cigars, you're talking 6-7 cents a cigar. So for me, there's still a spot in there for that sub $10, because look, I don't know how much you guys smoke, but I smoke 7 or 8 cigars a day. I can't afford to smoke unicorns all day, and most people can't. So to hit that spot in there with that sub $10, that's still quality, it's still quality tobacco, it still draws every time, is kind of what we were.
Do you think that, and this is really not supposed to be controversial in any way or shape, but do you think that, especially on the boutique side of the industry, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the vast majority of consumers and the real geeky, nerdy, thin layer of cream sort of floating atop of the majority of the bulk of everyday cigar smokers?
Yeah, I think there's a huge disconnect, but I also think that creme de la creme, and I include myself in this description, we don't know nearly what we think we know. I mean, when you sit down, you come down here to Nicaragua and you sit down with some of these tobacco guys, I remember once I was sitting with Esteban Diesla and I was doing a thing that Skip Martin made me called Tobacco School. And they'd roll up puritos of Jalapa, Esteli, Condega, Viso, Seco, Lajero, little puritos each one, and you'd smoke each one, and you'd take an actual full leaf and light it, look how it combusts to see if the combustion rates were good enough to be wrapper or binder or whatever. And I was doing this thing for 2 full days with Esteban, and Esteban was literally 30 feet away from me. And somebody had opened a bale of something that I didn't recognize. So I pulled a leaf out and I held it up. I'm like, Esteban, KSSO, what is this? And from across the room, he said, oh, that is some Brazilian Arapiraca I bought from this farmer 4 years ago on blah, 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 blah. From across the room, just looking at it. And I was like, I'm never going to know what I need to know to do this. I mean, these guys down here, you know, they started priming tobacco plants when they were 8, 9, 10 years old and worked their way all the way up. And now there's blenders in these little factories that know more in their pinky finger than any of us that grew up in the US or Europe will probably ever know, except maybe Steve Socket, because he knows more about tobacco pinky finger than I ever will. But it's an interesting, because you hear somebody say, oh, I don't smoke anything with jalapa in it. Or my favorite one, Mexican tobacco sucks. I hate Mexican tobacco. I'll never smoke anything with Mexican tobacco. And the guy's smoking a Padron Maduro. Well, you know you're smoking Mexican tobacco right now. No, I'm not. Yeah, you are. You know that San Andreas Maduro wrapper on that cigar? That's from Mexico, buddy. Which the same wrapper is on the Fosforo Limitada, just saying.
Now, this leads me to an interesting conversation we've had here at the lounge multiple times, particularly in the recent months, when the question came up, particularly with more expensive cigars, as to why don't you disclose the exact blend of your cigars? And you know, I'm as geeky as it gets, and I would love to know the pH level in the soil and the amount of rain that fell in one particular growing season, and every little bit of information you can throw at me. But what I'm trying to get to is, disclosing a blend, for example, and telling you there's a Mexican San Andres wrapper on the cigar, and you have a Viso from Jalapa and an Esteli Ligero in the blend. That's all fine and dandy in terms of very accessible information to the consumer. But the question then becomes, what does that really tell you? Because if you haven't had the experience you were just describing to us a moment ago about smoking all these little fumos and getting to intricately know all these various tobaccos, you have no idea what this one particular leaf and the filler will contribute to the overall experience. And I would argue it might even create preconceived notions or misconceptions in your head. Another thing that you just mentioned is that, I don't smoke X, Y, Z, or I don't like cigars that have Connecticut broadleaf. But maybe it was something completely different that put you off with the last cigar you had. But there's something in your mind that's very hard to then change or deviate from. And I wholeheartedly wish that our industry were better at communicating all these intricacies and being more open in sharing.
I agree.
How do you think about that? What's your perspective from this?
I agree 1,000%. I'll give you an example. I don't know can you see that? No, it's not a shot.
Yeah.
You could take, it's my original blend for Fosforo. Literally wrote it down on a slip of paper, who he bought the tobacco from, blah, blah, blah. You could take that exact same recipe and a 2 years different later crop, make it to the exact components that Jose made this cigar, and you'd have a totally different tasting cigar. I agree with you 100% that people need to be more forthcoming where their blends are, because nobody can copy your blend. Like Romacraft, for example, if you look at the blend components for a Romacraft Neanderthal, and I'm not going to say who it is. I'm not going to say who this cigar is. But a new cigar came out last year that if you read the blend components, it's the exact same blend of cigar. San Andreas Maduro, Green River, Pennsylvania Sucker, blah, blah, blah. All the tobaccos are same down the line. The two cigars couldn't taste any different, because when you're selecting for tobacco, if you're selecting like Romacraft selects and they select for high texture, high flavor cigars, or you're selecting for a middle of the road approach, you're going to pick a different San Andreas. You're going to pick a different texture of filler. Your filler is not going to be as thick. That completely is going to change your cigar. So these people worried about, well, if I publish my blend components, somebody's going to copy them. I think that's crazy, because your selection process is going to determine how your cigars are going to take. And that's where a palate comes into effect, where you're making a third batch or a fourth batch of something. That's where the rubber really hits the road. I don't want to say it's easy to make a good cigar, but it's much more difficult to consistently make that same cigar, because every year the yields in your tobacco changes. Like you said, the pH in the soil changes. There was different rainfall. Everything is going to affect the flavor of the tobacco. But to make your cigar taste the same year in and year out, I don't think enough of our industry appreciates how hard that is. And the people like the Padrones and the Fuentes and Perdomo that have been doing that for 20 and 30 years, I can still walk in my humidor and grab a Fuente Double Chateau and it tastes like it did in 1995, which is amazing accomplishment when you think about it. And it gave me a lot more respect for these legacy guys, where I can grab a short story, I can grab a Series 64 Principe, or I can grab a Davidoff Millennium, and they taste like I remember them tasting. And that's the real rub, and that's the real magic of this industry, how they do that. It's still amazing to me that they've been able to do that at a high level for so long.
And Jeff, what's interesting about that is when you think about it, that's truly the art and the craft of the master blender. That's what these cellar masters in the Champagne region or in Cognac have mastered over the years, because with varying stock, with different barrels, different eau de vis, they managed to recreate that same taste profile. And exactly what you said with the short story, for example, year after year, you will get a consistent profile and you get exactly the cigar you're looking for, even though behind the scenes, people like Carlito have to pull all the strings to adjust half a leaf here, go up a priming, change little components in the blend in order to come to the same exact result that you're looking for. So this again is where I feel like it's a bit challenging to just openly disclose, here's the blend, and that's going to be it for the next 20 odd years, and you're supposed to always have the same cigar experience. So I'm actually wondering myself, how can we as an industry be open and honest and transparent on the one hand, whilst recreating that experience and staying true to the promise that we've set for ourselves in terms of, this is the cigar I want to deliver.
I mean, going back to what Jeff was saying, obviously you were saying that most of us, apart from the likes of Steve Saka, haven't got half the information that we think we do. And I think nowadays, from a UK perspective, and seeing obviously being involved in the cigar industry and seeing it across, the US, etc., you can see there's that thirst for knowledge. But whether they know what to do with that knowledge is another thing. So I personally think blends like yourself should be open and honest. But then again, I think people want the information, but they don't necessarily know what they're going to do with it, or how to process it, or how to replicate it, or what it even means to have as you said, different leaves, different Bizos and Secos. So I think we're just as consumers, we're hungry for more information, be it through the way wine was or through the craft beer movement. People are just wanting to know for the sake of knowing, whether that's being genuine, just curiosity, or just pure nosiness. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I agree. I'm 100% in favor of disclosing all your blends. I don't think at the end of the day, I don't think it means all that much because of this discussion we've been having, but why not? I mean, I made the same mistake. I thought for years I hated Corojo because I must have been having a bad day and smoked a cigar and it made me sick. And I looked up the blend and it was a Corojo wrapper and had Corojo filler. I'm like, I'm not smoking that shit anymore. And then just like 2 years ago, I smoked a brilliant cigar and I was like, Corojo? Uh-oh. I mean, I did the same thing. I didn't smoke any Corojo tobacco for probably 10 years because I thought I hated it. Well, it turns out it's fantastic. I made the exact same mistake that I'm telling you that I think people make. They say, I don't like this, or I don't like this, or I don't like this. I mean, Skip Martin has a saying, and I wish our industry could be more like this. Smoke it. If you like it, come back and buy another one. And that's the end of the story. I mean, and that's really what I'm going for. And that's kind of my ethos is like, hey, it's $8. Try one. If you like it, come back and buy more. I'm not going to tell you that I found a rare bale of tobacco that they lost in the factory 20 years ago, and through 2 cigar booms, they didn't find it. I'm not going to tell you that it farts unicorn sparkles when you smoke it, because it doesn't. I don't need to tell you how great my secret process, my new form of entubado for rolling cigars. Smoke it. If you like it, come back and buy another one. That's all it really needs to be. All this, the newest, greatest, we've got this new tobacco, seed variety, method of rolling, way of aging. It's all a bunch of crap. Smoke the cigar. You like it? Yeah, I loved it. Here, buy a 10-pack, buy a box, buy 10 boxes. But all this, oh, we found this in the warehouse, we did this, we used this, we did this. It's at the end of the day, when you get kind of down into the weeds and seeing how the tobacco is sorted, selected, rolled, and aged, you know, all that stuff is just, it's just marketing.
Yeah. And
no
this is
impact on the flavor. Has no impact on the quality of the cigar.
Apologies, I didn't want to cut you off, but you just made me think of, I think there's 2 very distinct aspects to this. One is just marketing BS that you're trying to make your cigars a little more expensive with. And the other one is really going to the in-depth information and being more open and transparent with components, or trying to propose more educational content or information to the people walking through your shop door. And here you are as both a retailer operating a shop in the lounge, but also a brand owner manufacturing your own cigars. Where do you think we should all try to be better in communicating towards the end consumer, helping them to better understand and gain more knowledge, so that the entire industry can evolve? And I think that we often argue that the wine industry is probably 10, 15 years ahead of the cigar industry in terms of educational content being out there, information being shared. But then also we have to keep in mind that it's very easy to walk into a wine bar or into a liquor store and buy a single grape expression and understand this is what a Cabernet Sauvignon from France could taste like, and then have a comparison with a similar blend or single grape variety wine from California, Argentina, Chile, whatever it is. So it's maybe easier for the end consumer to educate themselves on these components because it's readily available. Whereas you can hardly walk into a cigar shop and be like, could I have a little fumo of Esteli Ligero so I can educate myself?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's resources out there we don't take enough advantage of. For one, Tobacconist University does a great job of teaching you kind of the nuts and bolts of the process of, from seed to cigar. They do a great job. I don't think we use them enough. Probably the most impactful event I ever had at the cigar store was Michael Herklots came through and did his blend component seminar. And it was absolute. People talk about it 7-8 years later, ask when we're doing it again. And I think that's really kind of the forgotten job of retailers now. I mean, I'm there to sell cigars, but I also need to be more cognizant and better. We need to be creating a new generation of cigar smokers. And I don't think the industry as a whole has done really well at that. And I don't have any answers for that or why. Just as a whole, I don't think the industry has done real well with that. We tend to kind of roll our eyes when a 21-year-old comes in and starts talking about cigars, but those guys are our future. And I think retailers on a whole need to do a better job of taking the reins of that and educating their consumers. I've looked at the possibility of doing a Cigar 101 every week, just to help create more cigar smokers, because the more information people have and the more they learn about this industry, the more they fall in love with it. And when you tell an average consumer that this cigar here has literally been touched by 300 hands before it gets to you, they're like, no way. And you sit down and you show them, from being hand planted to being watered, to being primed, to being put in the curing barn, to being selected 75 times through that process, the different sorting points throughout the process. And it still only cost me $22 to smoke this cigar. What are you, crazy? It should cost $1,000 for all the work that went into it. Educating consumers on that, I think, is probably the biggest downfall of retailers so far. Most retailers want to just sit behind their desk and sell cigars. And I think if we're not actively courting and creating a new generation of cigar smokers, we're doing ourselves a big disservice over time.
Amen to that.
And funny enough, we were talking about this before we came on air with the guys here at City of London, and they're all a much younger crowd than we are, and makes me feel very old. But we were having the same conversation about, it's not there was what the older hats are doing is wrong. It's just that what the younger crowds are doing is different. They're tapping into obviously the different markets that are out there, the different mediums, be it through social media or different ideas, and thinking more outside the box instead of saying this is how it's done, this is the blueprint, this is how it's always going to be done. And I think that's, as you said, well, exactly as you said, which is what the industry needs. If we're going to appeal to the younger market and get their thoughts, get their ideas, get their passion, and build their passion, and not just shun them for being youngsters and, oh, what do they know, but actually embracing that. And as you said, feeding them knowledge and passing on what we know to them, then I think we're doomed if we don't.
100%, 100% agree. I mean, we try to sponsor at least one trip a year, either to Cuba or Nicaragua, so people can, and I mean, yeah, it's fun, but we want it to be a learning experience for people and be able to actually see the love and the care and the hard work that goes into their cigars. And yeah, we have fun and we go out at night and we do all those things, but educating your newer consumers, I think, is the biggest job of retailers, and where we fall the flattest the last little bit.
A quick follow-up question on the generational shift, Jeff. Do you think that amongst the younger consumers now, is there an eagerness that you haven't experienced with the older generation before? Whereas in the old days, you probably have the guy coming in smoking the exact same cigar 365 days a year. Obviously, nowadays we know most people are chasing the next thing, what's new, the next limited edition. But just in general, do you feel that the young generation is eager to learn and interested in more details and intricacies in order to educate themselves compared to the older one?
With the caveat that I haven't been behind my desk for 3 years almost now. But yes, 100%. And they're so used, the younger generation is so used to being able to get all the information they want that kind of ties back into our conversation before about being more open and transparent with the new generation of cigar smokers. They're not gonna accept this blend undisclosed. They want to know everything that went into it. They want to know this, they want to know that. So yeah, I have seen that over time. I think they're much younger, much more eager to experiment and learn different things. And they're not going to say, oh, I'm not going to smoke this. It's got Pennsylvania broadleaf. I don't like Pennsylvania broadleaf. They're like, oh, what's Pennsylvania broadleaf? It's grown in the US. Cool. Let me try that. Let me try this. Let me try this. Much more eager.
A lot less brand loyalty these days than what there used to be.
I 100%, I think so. Yeah, much less.
Mace is here with us, and I see his hand up. Mace, chime in. Curious to hear your question, man.
Evening, everybody. Yeah, Jeff, for me, so just enjoying that Limitada, really nice cigar. Had a few other Fosforos, but yeah, first time having the Limitada, really nice cigar, so really enjoying that. I'm not of the I don't like the Mexican, I don't like, so yeah. it's always funny when you hear that, because it's like a particular food or something, and someone says, oh, I don't like this, and then it's an ingredient in their food, and it's like, well, you're eating it, you're enjoying it.
Yeah,
so yeah,
you don't like it?
Never been a fan of that, but I had a couple of questions, and it's kind of around your background, which is really interesting in that I don't see it as it's not a war, but there's a retail, there's the online, right? And you've sort of come, I think your position is interesting in that you've come from this retail, and then you sort of now have become your own sort of, producer, and you got your own cigar that you're putting out there. I wanted to get your take on what's your stance on the online space, and has that evolved as you've now grown your own brand and potentially you're looking at that distribution? Do you see the online, have you sort of changed your mindset? Have you always been a fan of the online space as well? Or what's your take on sort of retail, brick and mortar versus the online space?
Well, my stance is a little controversial on that. And it ties into what I was saying before, is that you're not selling cigars as a retailer, you're selling an experience. I don't worry about online sales. I don't worry about the online giants at all. I mean, I don't lose a second of sleep over them, because what we do is completely different from what they do. And to take that farther, I think the retailers that spend a bunch of time complaining about that are doomed to fail, because we focus on our store and what we do, and we focus on curating an experience for our consumers. Online stores can't do that. All they can do is discount and send you swag. So I know they're there. I know they're huge, but for me, I just ignore them. And if somebody comes in, I mean, there's a lot of times they'll come in and show us a picture of whatever online giant is selling this box for that. And if it's under cost, if it's anything over cost, most of the time I'll match it. But if it's under cost, I'll tell them I can't sell it. Buy it there.
Fair enough. That's good to hear. And I guess just sort of following up on that and your experience being sort of retail, do you feel that there's more or retailers should do more in terms of educating themselves? Because I guess you have a great sort of learning in that you're in Nicaragua, you are in the industry, not just from a sales perspective, but you've got your own brand. Do you think
Right.
that there's something there more that retailers could do in terms of actually educating themselves by getting out there and, not necessarily look, not everybody can, make their own cigar and sort of get it out there, but
Right.
do you feel that
Yeah.
there's there that really adds value?
Well, I mean, like you said, not everybody's going to just pack up and move to Nicaragua. I've been doing the same thing for 25 years and wanted to get out and learn something new. I'm getting older and I wanted to spice things up a little bit. So I did that. But again, going back to the other conversation, there's plenty of resources. You can pull up Tobacconist University and you can learn so much there for free. There's so many online resources. The PCA has resources. Tobacconist University has resources. So many people, so many retailers just consider it a sales job, and I don't. I mean, I consider it more of an educational, cultivating customers, creating an experience for people to be able to learn this industry, enjoy this industry, and taking people down to Nicaragua and taking people down to Cuba and letting them get their hands on and see that. Because that, when we talk about selling an experience, I've got people, we did our first Nicaragua trip 11 years ago, and people are still talking about that trip. It creates you a customer for life. I mean, so they're opening 2 or 3 new cigar stores around me in the next year. And people have asked me, oh, I bet you're worried. I bet you're worried. I bet you're worried. I bet you I'm not. Not at all. More people smoking cigars means more people are going to find out about me. More people find out about me. They're going to come give us a try. And once they give us a try, it's over. So for me, it's like, I don't care. Open one across the street. I'm fine. We do what we do. We do it as well as we can, and the chips fall wherever they fall.
On that sort of creating that experience, then do you kind of see it as a lot of retailers lack that sort of, I guess there's a hospitality element to it. There's, you create an experience by the moment somebody walks in, recommendations, everything that goes into that whole experience. And you just mentioned an interesting point that a lot of people are just seeing it as it's sales. Get the customer in, give them something, give them what they want, but you feel like it's maybe some of that training isn't just the online learn about tobacco, but actually, you know what, open up and learn a bit more about hospitality and how to treat customers and how to create that experience. Because I feel that is definitely something that's missing.
Right. Well, I mean, it can be as little as somebody walks in and says, I really love this cigar. You don't carry it. Do you have anything similar? And look, again, I don't want to throw any stones and I don't have any names, but half the cigar stores you walk into, they won't have any idea. But me and my guys, if you tell me, I really liked this cigar, my guys can say, okay, that's a Connecticut wrapper and it's primarily Nicaraguan filler, and try this Warped Connecticut or try this Fosforo Connecticut, or here's 3 cigars that are really similar to the one you love. And a lot of places can't even do that. And that's just step one, right? Of curating an experience for somebody. But so many retailers can't even do that. Somebody comes in and says, I love a Saka comp. Well, it's Connecticut broadleaf, Nika, Nika, and Nika. So I've got 5 or 6 cigars I can take them to. They come in and tell me I love a short story. Well, that's a Cameroon wrapped Dominican filler. Try this. And a lot of retailers can't even do that. They're like, oh yeah, here, try this. We'll take it and say, hey, this has the same wrapper leaf. The binder's a little different, but that doesn't really affect the flavor. It's Nicaraguan filler, blah, 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 blah. And educate the people. And that's where you get the repeat customers. That's where you get customers coming back. That's where you get Google reviews that say, man, I don't know anything about cigars, but this guy took 20 minutes and explained this to me and explained this to me and explained this to me. I'm coming back there. That's where all that gets created.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Jeff. And yeah, wishing you all the very best with the cigars. Many more to come. Hopefully, many more that we can get out here in the UK and friends.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Jeff, just a quick question before I want to give Albert an opportunity to raise his questions as well. If you were to start from scratch with Riverside Cigar Shop and Lounge, Match Cigar Bar, is there anything that you would do fundamentally different nowadays based on the experience you gained over the last decades?
That's a great question. Because, you know, the funny thing, and I think about this all the time, when I opened the cigar store, I thought I knew what I was doing. I mean, I ran the premium cigar operations for Kramer Smoke Shop for almost 2 years, and I thought I knew what I was doing. And I look back 5 years later and I thought, wow, you knew nothing. And I look back now 15 years later, you knew next to nothing. But I learned as I went along, and every little bit I learned, I tried to incorporate into my operation. And for me, the experience I've gained, like you said earlier, being agile and being able to adapt, the things I learned going through everything we went through for the first 10 years, I wouldn't change that for anything. Now, if I was opening a brand new store now with what I know now, of course, I do a lot of things differently. But the learning process of getting there and saying, okay, here's where we're starting, and then growing to here, and then to here, and then to here, and then to here was invaluable. So I wouldn't change that for anything.
Amen. Albert, I think that's a great segue to your questions, and please chime in.
Well, hi Jeff, and thanks, Reinhard. I just flabbergasted how Reinhard brings some guests and you're learning every week. Now, this is 40 years old and started smoking 15 years ago, and I still every single time, I'm just surprised. So thank you for that first off. And then here's a segue, which 90% of that question you so elegantly borrow it from my question. No, I mean, point is I guess a lot of people think as opening a cigar lounge is an easy way to make money. And it's crazy. And, you in the UK, Mace can back me up. We have some people that they just, whatever, convert some random commercial, lot into a cigar lounge, and it looks, looks basic, and then they complain, okay, I'm not getting customers, should I go online? It just shows how unprepared they were. But you wouldn't go into any business, hospitality, cafe, restaurant, any business, unprepared, because this is one of the toughest industries to survive. So many variables that can go wrong. And my question was really, simple. It's, can you summarize, because you kind of mentioned you talk about it a lot, almost every day, and now you're opening a few more lounges. What would be top 5 things you would do differently? Some I don't know, maybe 5 regrets.
Oh, that's a good question again. Well, first, if you want to make $1 million in the cigar industry, start with 2 million.
I heard that before.
Yeah, it is not an easy way to make money. And this is probably not the greatest thing, answer-wise, but again, going back to what I just told Reinhard, I wouldn't change a thing for the experience. Do I regret some things? Yeah, sure. I wish I would have started out not so completely anti-legacy brands, because having done this for years now, I've really come to an appreciation of how hard what they've done and what they've accomplished is. And I was one of those guys who was like, I'm never smoking any of these again. These guys don't know what they're doing. They don't have any idea. But when you sit back and look at it objectively over the years, what the Fuentes and the Padrones and all the legacy brands have accomplished is just amazing. Second biggest regret probably is having business partners. I would never do that again, but that's just a personal thing for me. You know, I had to buy out 2 separate business partners, one from the original cigar store and one from the bar. Just because we didn't see eye to eye, and it was, you know, being a little arrogant, but it was my concept and my idea, and we're going to do things my way, and we'll sink or swim doing that. Those are probably my 2 biggest regrets and the 2 things I would change over time. But it's, you know, to your opening comment that people look at this as an easy way to make money. I probably worked for the first 2.5 years. I worked 7 days a week, 14, 15 hours a day. I had, in the cigar shop when I first opened, I had no cleaning crew. I had no people working the desk. It was me sitting behind an 8-foot banquet table with a tablecloth over with the computer set up on it from 11 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. And I usually get there at 9 in the morning to do my paperwork. So, you know, 14, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2.5 years. It's not the easiest thing I've ever
Well, that's a great answer. And I just think that what people, you know, don't realize that, you know, like I was, you know, having enough capital. But I think the biggest problem is like you mentioned, is commitment. Like, you know, it's just you know, whatever startup you're in, you have to commit fully, like unconditionally. And the you know, on the partners, that's so funny, you know. I had to do that myself. So I totally share your pain. And the probably one thing that I hope that you're gonna mention was the certain aspect of that training, because it's just in my mind that's a paramount. It's you can be the walking encyclopedia yourself, but that's not gonna scale. You know, your staff needs to be scaled and scaled up and trained. Uh, have you put some sort of training manual in place, or what was your experience to make sure that your staff really can recognize cigars and, you know, offer something similar what the customer, because it's that is the sales pitch. You know, the guy came in wanting to buy Mercedes S-Class and you don't have one. So any
Right.
training manuals in place? That's basically the,
We
you know,
don't have a
summary.
training place yet. I got really lucky. My manager at the cigar store was a cigar geek when I hired him. And we do require all of our cigar shop employees to complete the Tobacconist University Certified Retail Tobacconist training, because I think it's the best thing out there for very little money. But yeah, that is one thing that I would probably, if I had to do it all over again, focus more on is the training aspect, to make sure everybody that works for me knows my overriding philosophy. But like you said, they don't know everything I know about tobacco, but they know a lot. And Tobacconist University does a great job helping us with that. But back to one thing you said, the commitment issue, I think a lot of people miss that, because look, there's been times where it's been super, super, super tough, and I didn't think I was going to make it. I bought out a business partner and got a divorce in the same year, and I stayed awake most nights wondering how I was going to make it. But it goes back, and one more thing you said about capitalization, I was woefully underfinanced going in. I started my cigar shop with $60,000. And I thought that I needed $250,000. And I was literally in 2010, I remember this like it was yesterday. I was on Twitter bitching that I wanted to open a cigar store, but I just couldn't see any way to doing it without less than $250,000. And some guy named Chief Hava got on there and said, bullshit, you only need XYZ to do this. I was like, dude, I've got like 20 pro formas scattered around my desk. I can't get this thing under 250. He messaged me back, send me your pro forma. So I sent him my pro forma. Next morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, I got it back. It's marked up. You don't need this. You don't need this. You're spending $1,000 a chair. Go to value spend $100 a chair. I was like, well, they won't last. Then replace them 6 months later when you know you've got a business. And it ended up being Skip Martin from Roma Craft Tobacco was who I was messaging with. That's how we actually met. And so I took the ball and ran with $60,000. And now we do 60,000 in sales a week, not a week, every 2 weeks, every 2.5 weeks. But without that absolute commitment that, I mean, again, it sounds a little arrogant, but in my mind, what I'm doing is right. And I've always been convinced of that with the cigar shop. So I'm like, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. I don't care what happens. I'll find a way around it because in my heart of hearts, I believe what we're doing is the right way to do it. And without that, I would have been done 10 years ago.
What a great answer, and thank you again. You know, it's true wisdom from, you know, someone who is very seasoned in the industry. So I'll take that. Thanks, Reinhard. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Jeff, one additional note that just sprang to my mind when you were talking about commitment is I feel that quite many people who are seasoned cigar aficionados or connoisseurs would like to flirt with the industry one way or another. And sometimes it almost feels like being a good cigar smoker qualifies you to be a good cigar professional in whichever way, shape, or form, whether that's a brand rep or a cigar lounge and store operator, or even a manufacturer. And you've experienced that both on the retail side of things and also as a manufacturer. It's not enough to smoke 5 cigars a day to become successful in an industry that's extremely demanding and challenging from the get-go. So I think you really need to find that balance between your passion and love and enthusiasm for tobacco and cigars, but pair that with the right business skills and with the right mindset, which for me, it comes back to the hospitality aspect you mentioned earlier. At the end of the day, we're all service providers, whether as a store operator, all we try to do is help other people enjoy a wonderful product, have a great time, relax, whatever it is that they're looking for the moment they walk into your shop. And the same is true as a manufacturer or brand owner. You're really rolling your heart and soul into a slender cigar, proposing that to whoever's out there. And our job is to offer something that helps other people have a great time and enjoy themselves. And I feel if you don't have that loving and caring soul and mindset, it'll be very tough for you to succeed in the end. So that to me is applaudable on all the people who've been successful in this industry, whether as a retailer, a distributor, or a manufacturer. But you have to really find that sweet spot where your passion and your professionalism meet in order to be successful on the long term.
Yeah, and I think the common denominator amongst people like yourself who are successful in what they've done is that, and for me, it's sort of 2 simple things that I sort of stick by, and you touched on them before earlier. Is one is creating moments of magic for people, as I like to call it, you know, and that comes from the hospitality background, but also from owning my own restaurant that had a wine restaurant, a wine shop, and sold cigars. I also listened for buying signals. And buying signals wasn't necessarily just I'm going to sell in this wine, or I'm going to sell in this cigar, or I'm going to upsell something. It's gleaning information from them so you can make their experience better next time. And it's always listening to the customer and seeing how you can not just better their experience there now, but their future experiences. And that's obviously what you touched on numerous times, which, you know, your experience with the car industry. You listen for those buying signals, you listen what the customer wants, and you tailored your package to it. So whether you're selling cars or cigars or boats, it's the ethos is always the same.
Yeah, we in the automobile industry, we call that downstream selling, where you ask a set of questions to ascertain the wants and needs and desires of the consumers. And so many people get in their heads that selling is talking, and that's wrong. Selling is listening. And when you listen to your consumer and take to heart what they're saying, that gives you a plan for their next experience and their next experience and their next experience. I couldn't agree any more with that. And going back to the previous thing Reinhard was saying, if you spend any time with manufacturers or reps, they've got one thing that they say, and they say it over and over and over again, and it's this: most retailers suck. I talk to manufacturers reps all the time, and they hate going into cigar shop, because all they care about is, well, I want, you know, XYZ online is selling a box of Hoya de Monterey's for $113, and my cost is $128. So I want 100 boxes at $113. Or they're this, or they're that, or they're complaining about the online guys. I mean, we could lose probably half our retailers and not get hurt at all, because they have no idea how to track their inventory. They don't track their velocity. They run out of stock, and, oh, that's on back order. No, it's not. I just talked to the rep yesterday, and they've got 100 boxes sitting there trying to get rid of. You just don't want to order it. I mean, so, you know, it's really incumbent on us as retailers to kind of move that needle and move it more towards creating the experience, creating the education to create lifelong cigar smokers. Because if I get a guy when he's 21, what's that going to make me over the next 40 years? I mean, it's to our benefit to do that. But again, so many people are just stuck behind their desk trying to figure out if, you know, they can pay the electricity bill next month, and not worried about the long-term impact of what they're doing and how they're treating their customer base. But what do I know?
One final question. Jeff, one final question on that, and it sort of goes back to the retail side, and what I asked you earlier about, do you create the experience to be representative or a mirror of your philosophy and your heart and soul, or do you listen more to your consumers? And the very same question applies when you create your own product in form of a cigar rather than an experience as a retailer and lounge operator. Do you believe in the philosophy of build it and they will come? Or do you try to more actively listen to what the consumer is telling you in order to produce something and offer something to the market that you know will stick because the demand is already there, and that's what the customers are gravitating towards?
I think the challenge is balancing those two worldviews, and ending up somewhere in the middle. I'll give you an example. I love this story, and it just slays me every time. If I'm working the humidor and somebody walks in and they see Saka's Unicorn on the shelf, they'll say, "Oh my God, $100 cigar. Is it worth $100?" I'm like, nope, not a cigar in this world is worth $100. And they'll look at me and their eyes will get big and they'll say, "What do you mean? Why are you selling it then?" And I'll tell them the whole story, because a cigar is not what about what it costs. A cigar is about the experience. Now, if you just finished paying 4 years for your kid to graduate from Harvard, or you just got divorced or married, or whatever the celebration is, do you want to celebrate with an $8 cigar? Or do you want to celebrate with a $100 cigar? And I'm telling you, the conversation starts with me telling them the cigar is not worth $100. And 9 out of 10 people walk out with a unicorn. After I flat told them, no, it's not worth it, I can get you a cigar just as good for $12. They walk away with a unicorn. Because my worldview is that this cigar costs, okay, let's give you the benefit of doubt and say you've got $4 of tobacco and labor in that cigar, which is way high, but let's say you've got that much in it. So by the time it gets to the US, you might have $8 in it, and you're selling it for $100. To me, that's not worth it, but I'm not the one spending my money, and it's not my experience. It's theirs. It's their experience, and if they choose to spend $100 to commemorate the experience, that's their choice. So to me, balancing those two worldviews, being honest with consumers, but understanding that my worldview is not everybody's. I mean, do I smoke a unicorn? Heck yeah, I smoked a unicorn. It was great. But I also smoked my own cigar that cost me, less than $2 to import to the United States, and it's great too. So I don't try to enforce my mind view on people, my worldview on people, but I let them know what it is because I'm just being honest and straightforward about it.
Amen to that. Jeff, I can't tell you what a tremendous pleasure it's been to have you on the show and learn from your experience and take a real deep dive with you into the retail side of things and the manufacturing aspect of our industry. It's been delightful to host you and to learn from you. So I can't thank you enough for everything that you shared with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
One final question, Jeff. I mean, you have such a tremendous amount of experience in the industry, yet it feels like you're barely getting started. And I know that you have plenty of new tricks and new ideas up your sleeve. What are some of the things that still keep you up at night, and some of the things you would still love to offer to the industry in one way or another, whether that's on the retail side, in manufacturing new experiences, or even other ideas, whether it's educational? What are some of the dreams that you still have that you would like to see coming into fruition?
Well, I've actually been thinking a lot about that because I don't want to get stagnant in what I do. I'm working really hard lately on my tobacco knowledge, just overall tobacco knowledge, because, and I've said this before, but these guys that look at tobacco and they'll spread a leaf out and they'll push their thumb up on it and they'll say, see that? That means there's enough fat left in this leaf that it needs to ferment for another 2 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anything. So I've been working real closely with Romacraft's tobacco guy to try to learn more about fermentation, about the way tobacco processes. I mean, there's just so much to learn in tobacco, but actually this conversation might keep me awake tonight because I need to get more on the educational aspect of creating that new generation of cigar smokers. And I've kind of a little bit lost sight of that being here and being involved in the manufacturing end and trying to up my knowledge of tobacco. And I need to get on that and start planning out maybe a seminar series of Cigar 101s to try to help us and help the industry create that new generation of cigar smokers. That's going to keep me up tonight.
I can only applaud you for that, Jeff. And I truly hope from the heart that our show today was a little step into that direction. And I hope that we can offer valuable content and information and transparency to everybody out there willing to listen. So again, thank you wholeheartedly for everything that you shared with us. And we're all super excited for what's to come next. And all the value you'll continue to bring to this industry. Thank you wholeheartedly.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being here. Thank you, guys.
Jeff,
Many,
very
many
interesting. Thank you,
everybody
man.
joining us today.
Thank you,
What a
guys.
great pleasure. What a privilege. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you very, very soon. Next Wednesday, same time, same station here at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
All the best, everyone. Jeff,
Thanks
lovely to
so
meet
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff. It's
John
really great.
Strange from Bro Imports, Jeff Mouttet from Riverside Cigar Shop and Lounge, Match Cigar Bar, and Fosforo Cigars. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night and light 'em up. Goodbye, everybody.
All right,
Enjoy the
Reinhard.
London nightlife, guys.